It started with a diagnosis: severe depression. I genuinely believed couples counseling was our last hope, a lifeline for my struggling wife and our marriage. But instead, it became the battlefield where she looked me in the eye and asked for permission to sleep with other people, while I remained fiercely, foolishly loyal. The betrayal wasn't just a request, it was a dagger straight to my heart, a declaration that she wanted to explore her single life and her married life at the same time. When I refused, the woman I loved publicly shamed me in front of my entire family, labeling me as conservative, insecure, and possessive. That was the moment I knew something had to give. About 5 months before all this blew up, my wife Sarah received her formal diagnosis. It wasn't a shocking revelation. I'd suspected for a while that she wasn't doing well. This year in particular, she seemed to be drowning in grief over the loss of 2 people who had once meant the world to her: her ex-boyfriend and her best friend. To give you some context, before Sarah and I even started dating, she and her ex were in a serious long-term relationship. Then out of nowhere, he cheated on her with her best friend, someone Sarah considered a sister. This double betrayal cut her incredibly deep, shattering 2 of her most important connections at once. After that, Sarah stayed single for a long time. She was terrified to trust anyone, needing time to heal and process the pain. By the time I met her, she seemed to have found some peace and was ready to move on. Still, the shadow of that betrayal lingered, making her a little cautious, a little guarded. We dated for 4 wonderful years, navigating our ups and downs, before we decided to get married. Our wedding was beautiful, filled with so much joy, surrounded by friends, family, and the people who mattered most. In those early years, Sarah was an incredible partner, supportive, kind, understanding, and deeply caring. Marriage brought us even closer. We built a life together that felt strong, promising, and full of love. But then earlier this year, tragedy struck. Sarah's ex-boyfriend and her former best friend died together in a car accident. The news hit her like a physical blow. For years she'd held on to resentment, but now, faced with their absolute finality, she was completely overwhelmed by an unexpected wave of grief. Something inside her seemed to shatter. She'd sometimes share with me how she wished she'd been able to resolve things, to reconcile, to forgive them fully, or at least to speak her piece. Knowing they were gone forever, without any chance for closure, seemed to weigh heavily on her heart. I tried to reassure her, telling her it was okay to feel that way. They had been important parts of her life. But instead, she started to blame herself for not mending things before they passed. You see, her best friend had reached out multiple times over the years, apologizing and trying to make amends. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to forgive her. And honestly, I didn't blame her. It's not every day your best friend sleeps with your partner. Even with the apologies, the pain of the past was something Sarah couldn't just put aside. I comforted her, repeatedly reminding her that what happened wasn't her fault, that she had every right to protect herself from further hurt. But no amount of reassurance seemed to help. Instead, Sarah's grief only grew, spiraling into something darker, something harder to manage. She'd spend hours, days, even just lying in bed watching TV, or staring blankly at the wall, a beer in her hand. She started skipping work, calling in sick, or just staying home without any explanation. I could see her sinking deeper into despair, and my heart ached. I tried my best to encourage her, to get her out of the house, to do things that might make her feel a little better. I suggested small outings, anything for a distraction, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Due to her lack of motivation, she lost her job, and I became the sole breadwinner. Slowly, her behavior began to change in other, more unsettling ways. Her mood became unpredictable, shifting between easily irritated and completely shut down. She grew distant, defensive, snapping at me over the smallest things. On top of not working, she did nothing to help around the house. Household responsibilities piled up, and I found myself carrying the weight of daily life alone, watching her drift further and further away. Even then, I still loved her. I thought maybe we can still make it through this. But things just got worse. Sarah started picking fights if I stayed out too late, whether for work or just to unwind with friends. I'd come home to find her sitting on the couch, waiting, barrage me with questions about why I was late, who I was with. Even if I answered honestly, she'd hint that she didn't believe me, accusing me of sleeping with coworkers or friends, saying that's why I was never home. These baseless accusations were both painful and offensive. No matter how much I tried to reassure her, she wouldn't listen. Our arguments became intense, exhausting. She demanded I come straight home after work, that I stay home on weekends, as if my time belonged only to her. I started to feel suffocated, the space I once had in our marriage shrinking, replaced by her insecurities and anger. Things escalated when her frustration spilled over physically. There were 2 alarming instances where she crossed a line I never thought she would. In one argument, she punched the sofa just above my head in a fit of rage, a violent display that left me feeling unsettled and wary. But the real breaking point came during another heated moment. She slapped me across the face. My wife was being completely controlling. That moment was a clear sign that her grief and depression had morphed into something darker, more dangerous. I realized I couldn't stay in a relationship where my safety and well-being were at risk. I packed my bags, ready to leave, ready to protect myself. Seeing me ready to walk out the door brought her to a state of desperation. She pleaded with me to stay, promising over and over that she would change. I stood firm, telling her that for me to even consider staying, she would need to seek real help. She agreed, saying she'd go to a doctor if it meant saving our marriage. Reluctantly, I decided to give our relationship one last try, clinging to a sliver of hope that she would actually commit to the help she so clearly needed. It was a difficult decision, filled with doubt, but I wanted to believe that the woman I had fallen in love with could still find her way back to herself, and to us. This was when Sarah was diagnosed with severe depression. She started medication and began meditating to manage her anger. Slowly, I started to see some positive changes emerge. The medication seemed to stabilize her mood, and she made genuine efforts to be more present and helpful around the house. Little by little, I saw glimpses of the person she used to be, the woman I fell in love with, and it gave me hope. She showed more willingness to reconnect, and I felt a bit of relief, thinking that maybe with time things could improve for us. However, a major issue remained unresolved: her reluctance to return to work and start earning money. She hasn't held any job since her diagnosis, and it became a source of ongoing tension. I didn't mind being the only one bringing in money, but I wanted her to at least try. Every time I brought it up, hoping to encourage her to consider even part-time work or a remote role, she pushed back, insisting she felt too low and weak to commit. This disagreement often led to yelling. On one hand, I knew she was struggling, but on the other, the added financial strain and her refusal to even explore options left me feeling incredibly frustrated and alone in carrying all the responsibilities. Last month, Sarah surprised me by suggesting we see a couples counselor. She said with our ongoing issues, we should see someone who could help us communicate more effectively. She'd even already reached out to a counselor and made an appointment. All I had to do was show up. I agreed, thinking this counselor could help us strengthen our relationship, and perhaps encourage her to take those first steps toward rebuilding her life. And if you're still with me through this wild ride, and you appreciate me sharing my truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me share more stories like this. But honestly, couples counseling made our relationship worse. During the sessions, Sarah admitted that a big part of her depression came from the life we'd built together. She felt she hadn't been able to live the way she wanted. That marriage brought too much responsibility. Then she dropped a bombshell. She still missed her ex-boyfriend sometimes and wished her best friend hadn't taken him with her. She claimed that after the betrayal from her ex, she never truly healed, and she felt like she'd missed out on life. The more she shared, the more I felt like a bystander in my own marriage. She said she felt like she'd rushed into marriage with me without taking time to enjoy being single and explore what she wanted after her heartbreak. I was taken aback. I reminded her she had proposed to me, and we dated for a long time. How could she feel rushed? The counselor immediately interrupted me, encouraging my wife to speak her truth, even if it hurt my feelings. Over the following session, Sarah confessed to me in front of the counselor that she wanted a redo of her single life. However, since we were already married, she asked if I would consider allowing her to see other people while I stayed committed to our marriage. I scoffed, praying it was a twisted, sick joke. But she was serious. She argued that she deserved to experience both her single life and married life at the same time, that it was only fair she had the opportunity to explore and find herself before it was too late. The air left my lungs. I was appalled by her suggestion and didn't hold back in letting her know just how absurd and hurtful it was. I told her her demand was outrageous and unacceptable. If she wanted to live like a single woman and explore, I could make that happen by leaving the marriage entirely. I wasn't about to stay in a relationship where I was expected to be loyal while she was free to act however she pleased with strangers. My words seemed to strike a nerve, and Sarah became furious. She shot back, claiming I could never understand her feelings because, unlike her, I'd been with multiple people before we got together. I calmly reminded her that I'd only had 2 previous relationships before her, both serious, meaningful commitments that simply hadn't worked out. It hurt that she would try to use my past against me, as if my experiences somehow made me less entitled to expect commitment in our marriage. I told her that if she felt so strongly about living a single life, she should have thought about that before we walked down the aisle. I reminded her of the sacrifices I had made this year, how I had been the one holding down our home, supporting her financially and emotionally through her depression, all because I believed in our marriage and in her. But now she was making these unreasonable demands. It was as if she wanted the security and stability I provided without honoring the commitment that came with it. I couldn't allow that. I told her firmly that she couldn't have it both ways. She needed to make a choice. A committed life with me or a single life without me. She couldn't keep me in limbo. expecting me to bend to her wishes while she kept one foot out the door. Since that confrontation in front of our counselor, Sarah has been sulking around the house, acting as if I'm the one who's being unreasonable. She's repeatedly tried to convince me that I'm being too harsh, even selfish, for refusing to let her have some fun. She keeps insisting that if I truly loved her, I'd be more open-minded and supportive of her desire to explore. Her attempts to guilt me make it clear that she still doesn't understand, or refuses to understand, how disrespectful and unfair her request is. But I'm standing firm. I've tried to be compassionate, understanding and supportive of her through the ups and downs of her depression. But there are boundaries I won't compromise on. I don't believe that being open-minded means sacrificing my own self-respect and the integrity of our marriage. I refuse to let her manipulate me into thinking that I'm the one in the wrong. For everyone wondering if Sarah might already be cheating and using this as a way to justify her behavior, I honestly don't think that's the case. My wife barely leaves the house. She's constantly around, either watching TV all day or idling in her own thoughts. Ironically, if she were having an affair, at least I'd have clarity and a straightforward reason to walk away. Yes, it would hurt, but at least I'd know she could move on without me. Instead, I'm left dealing with this painful and confusing situation. As for why Sarah's ex and best friend's deaths affected her so much all of a sudden, I'm none the wiser. But I'm guessing it might have given her a reality check. These were people she knew well, and maybe losing them so unexpectedly made her spiral. I'm not entirely sure why it hit her so hard, or why she thinks destroying our marriage and sleeping around will somehow fix this depression. As one commenter pointed out on my post, maybe Sarah never really loved me throughout our marriage. Maybe she just saw me as a safety net. Someone reliable and loyal after her relationship with her ex. And she liked that. Maybe she still has unresolved feelings for her ex, and now regrets not giving things a chance with him. Whatever the case, it's ridiculous that my wife now wants an open relationship, something I never would have expected as I'm deeply committed to monogamy. If she had ever hinted at wanting this kind of arrangement before, I would never have married her in the first place. This sudden shift feels like a complete betrayal of the life and values we built together. The reason I hadn't already left her was that I genuinely worried about her mental health. She had been my partner for so long, and for years it really felt like it was just her and me against the world. She was never this mean or selfish. She never raised a hand to me or yelled at me before. When she began to change so drastically after the tragic accident, I told myself that it was just a phase, that she would find her way back in time. I wanted to believe that the woman I fell in love with was still there, just buried under all the grief and pain. But after everything that's happened, I finally accepted that it was time for me to choose myself. This marriage had clearly come to an end. It's been 2 weeks since I had that realization. I've taken the next step for myself and reached out to a lawyer in private to start the divorce process. Sarah and I own our house together and have a joint account, but given that she's still unemployed and the financial situation is already strained, I needed to first secure my assets before moving forward. Once the lawyer told me everything was finalized, I was preparing myself to break the bad news to her. Then yesterday, Sarah crossed a line I simply couldn't ignore anymore, and I realized I couldn't keep my mouth shut any longer. We were at Sarah's sister's house for a family lunch. Her family is incredibly kind to me, and we've always had a good relationship, so I was looking forward to seeing them. For context, her family knew we'd been having some issues, but no one knew the whole story. During lunch, I noticed Sarah was continuously drinking. Now, she'd been strongly discouraged from drinking because of her depression medication, so seeing her with a glass of whiskey immediately raised red flags. When I gently tried to talk to her about it, she scoffed, ignored me, and went right back to drinking. I felt completely disrespected, so I just left her to it. Later, during the meal, as everyone was chatting, Sarah's mother asked how things were going between us and how my work was going. I mentioned that we'd been going to couples counseling and that Sarah still needed to work through her issues, then continued talking about my work. That's when Sarah interrupted me with a comment that caught me completely off guard. She said her depression could be cured faster if her husband understood what she really wanted in her life. Her mother asked what she meant. This is when Sarah openly declared, in front of her entire family, that I was the reason her life was so miserable. Everyone stopped eating and just stared at her in stunned confusion. We could all see she was thoroughly drunk by now. Sarah went on to say how I had refused to give her what she wanted, and that I was nothing but a conservative, insecure, and possessive husband who was making her feel suffocated. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. How she was twisting the narrative and putting the blame solely on me. Her sister immediately asked her why she was talking about me that way. She looked absolutely furious. The rest of her family sat in stunned silence, clearly shocked by her harsh accusations. I felt a searing humiliation, a deep betrayal, sitting there listening to her as she continued explaining to everyone that all he wanted was a small thing from me, but that I refused to give it to her only out of my stubbornness. Hearing this, something inside me snapped. The way she was trying to paint me as the villain to her own family was so deeply hurtful. I turned to Sarah and demanded to know why she wasn't being honest with them, why she wasn't giving them the entire truth about what she actually wanted. I looked at her family, and with all the frustration and pain I'd been holding in, I told them exactly what Sarah had asked of me. I laid it all out. How she wanted to explore other relationships, basically sleep around with strangers while I stayed loyal to her. How she expected me to continue being a supportive husband, while she enjoyed her life unburdened. I revealed the truth she had been hiding. Her family was stunned. Her mother asked Sarah if this was really what she was asking of me. Then her father, who had always been kind to me, scolded her for being so ridiculous and asked if she had truly lost her mind. Sarah, however, was still trying to justify herself. She insisted that everyone's marriage goes through a stalemate, and she believed this solution she was proposing would help solve the issues in our marriage. She justified that this was only temporary, that I should feel lucky. She was even asking me for permission when so many women simply cheated on their husbands without anybody ever finding out. I yelled at her, my voice raw with anger and exhaustion, telling her I was sick of her acting this way, trying to justify her sick excuses and selfish behavior. It was a breaking point. I announced in front of everyone that I was done with her. I couldn't keep fighting for a marriage that she no longer valued. I told her flat out that our marriage was over, and that I would be sending her the divorce papers. Her face looked completely dumbfounded, like she couldn't believe what was happening. She slowly blinked and just stared at me. I handed her my lawyer's card and told her I would be moving out that very day. If she wanted to talk about the divorce, she could contact my lawyer. Her parents, understandably concerned, tried to console me, telling me that Sarah was probably acting this way because of her medication, that she didn't really know what she was saying or doing. They seemed to be looking for a way to excuse her behavior, trying to explain it away as just a temporary lapse caused by her depression and the drinking. But I told them that their daughter was nothing but a loser who had been dragging me down for the past several months with her talk of depression and grief. There was no more waiting, no more hoping things would change. I had given everything I could to this relationship when she had only disrespected me time and time again. This time I was going to put myself first. Sarah tried to meekly argue that I couldn't just walk out of our marriage over something as silly as this, and that we needed to go back to counseling to work things out. I laughed bitterly at her suggestion, shaking my head. I told her that she absolutely needed a counselor, but that didn't mean I did. I wasn't crazy or unwell like her. I wasn't the one going around making reckless, selfish demands or blaming my partner for my own poor choices. I made it clear that I was not going to waste any more of my time trying to fix a marriage that I no longer wanted to fix. Without saying another word, I walked out of her sister's house and headed straight to our home, where I began packing. By the time Sarah finally got home in an Uber, frantically calling out my name, I was already ready to leave. When she arrived, she immediately tried the same old begging tactic again, pleading with me, insisting that we could work through this hiccup in our marriage. She even tried to hold on to my luggage to prevent me from walking out, but I informed her that if she stopped me, I would call 911 and make our divorce process even more difficult for her. I asked her firmly not to stop me from walking out with my things, and begrudgingly, she let me. I quickly packed up my stuff and left to stay at a motel. Thank you everyone for your comments. I feel much better after reading them. Ever since that day, I'm currently living out of a motel. Sarah has been sending me multiple voicemails. One moment she's accusing me of being heartless, telling me I'm ruining everything, and the next she's apologizing for her behavior, expressing how sorry she is for what she's done. It's been a constant emotional roller coaster, and it's clear to me now that she's trying to manipulate the situation, playing on my emotions to get me to reconsider. But at this point, I'm not giving in. Her words don't change the fact that I made a decision based on the person she's become, and I'm not going back to the way things were. I've heard enough excuses and false promises. I need to focus on moving forward and healing from everything that's happened. To clear up any confusion once and for all, I'm not leaving my ex because of her depression. I have a huge amount of respect for people going through mental health conditions. Depression is a serious struggle, and I do not want to minimize it. However, when it comes to my relationship with my ex, I am just exhausted because of her lack of accountability. She has constantly used her depression as an excuse to demand whatever she wants from me. This is not fair. I've given more than enough of myself to try and help her, but there comes a point where no single person can carry all this weight alone. Since leaving her, I have felt much better. I've been able to focus on myself, and being away from her has lessened my anxiety. Also, it's heartbreaking to break my marriage, but I have to walk away for my own mental and emotional health. It's been 5 months since my last update. I didn't update anything earlier as nothing was finalized until this month. Sarah and I are officially divorced, and I can finally say I'm a free man. We split the proceeds from the sale of our house equally. Thankfully, we didn't have any major liabilities or children, so there were no alimony payments involved. This day didn't come easily. There were countless moments when Sarah and her family tried everything they could to change my mind, to convince me to stay, to believe that things could somehow go back to normal. Her mother, for example, came to see me several times after I had moved out. She was on her daughter's side during the divorce proceedings, and was constantly trying to guilt me into staying with Sarah. She kept saying that Sarah needed a supportive partner like me, and that it was my duty to stay because of our marriage vows. At first, I tried to be polite and reason with her, but as she kept coming back, I became more frustrated. Finally, during one of her visits, I decided to be honest. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that Sarah had once slapped me in anger, and that I should have left her long before then. I asked her, if your own husband had ever done that, would you have stayed? I told her that despite everything I had stayed, even though Sarah didn't deserve my forgiveness. A quiet, devastating confession. She was completely shocked by what I said. After that, she never came to bother me again. During the divorce proceedings, I noticed that Sarah had gone even deeper into her depression. Honestly, she looked worse than she did before. I hope her family gets her the right help. Sarah's sister is the only one who believes I did the right thing by leaving her. She and I have continued to remain friends. Currently, I finally moved into a place of my own. Honestly, as a newly divorced man, it feels so incredibly liberating to be freed of my ex. I'm proud of myself for trusting my instincts and choosing to leave a toxic relationship before things could have spiraled any further. Now I wake up when I want with no one to answer to. I can focus on my career without distractions, and I'm able to spend time with my coworkers and friends guilt-free. I come and go as I please, and it's a feeling I haven't had in a long time. For the first time in a while, I feel like I'm truly living for myself again, without the weight of someone else's sadness and demands dragging me down. And that, for me, is worth everything. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads like this, where you had to choose yourself over a relationship you once cherished? Let me know in the comments below.